Well, welcome. Afternoon, Diana. We're here today in La Croisette as the film festival really starts to ramp up. You can see it starting to get busier, fuller, more excited. And it feels really fitting that we're here today talking about BritBox, a streaming service started in 2017. 2017 as a specialist streaming service. But a little bit more about you. Of course, you have driven BritBox into double-digit growth in the US over the past year, which is really no mean feat in a very, very crowded market. So huge congratulations on that. I'd love to hear more about how you achieved that and also the future trajectory in our chat. But a little bit more about you. Obviously started your career at Palmolive in FMCG, something that I know very, very well. And then went into a 19-year career at HBO. I mean, you must have seen such changes within that at your time at HBO.
And they keep changing.
Yeah.
Reading the news at all.
The ever-changing.
Right.
But your role there was really focused on digital marketing and growth. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And that must have been so interesting at that period of time as well.
Yeah, it was. I was there. I started actually in more of in one of the first direct-to-consumer ventures, which was really more about consumer products based on the IP and sort of as a way to build fandom and selling them directly to consumers. Yeah. And then I was there to launch the first streaming service in 2015, kind of from within, like kind of bubbled up from within. And then I was around for the second streaming launch, HBO Max, the bigger one after the AT&T merger and the combination with Warner and Turner. And then I left shortly before the Max launch, which is now, as of last couple of days, being rebranded back to HBO Max.
So actually,
quite the history there, and quite a case study for brand innovators, maybe.
So obviously fandoms and communities, everything we were just talking about for Magnum there, not new to you. You've been doing that for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, like every marketer, it's all about the consumer, right? Yeah. It's all about, the audience insight, what they're looking for, how do you engage them, how do you further connect with them.
Yeah. But enough about HBO. I'd love to hear more about BritBox because some of our audience may or may not know what BritBox is. I obviously know what BritBox is because it covers many of my favourite British television programmes. But would love to hear more about it as a brand.
Yes, for sure. So it is a streaming service, much like a Netflix or a Hulu, if that's familiar to you. But it's entirely British television and some British films, and it's essentially an export. So it's what we like to call ourselves the best of British television. It is all the British content that is developed and on television today in the UK, made across the entirety of the UK, as well as many classics, and we also create new originals, new modern originals, and we are basically a specialty streamer bringing the best of British television to other markets. And so our biggest market is US, Canada, North America, but we're also in Australia, and we're in the Nordics as well.
As a Brit, I'm dying to know what the Americans love the most from the best of British television.
Well, I would say that is a big part of what we're trying to do. As a specialty streamer, it's an advantage in some ways because you're not trying to compete with Netflix. It's very hard to do that, obviously. But we have grown, I would say, for the first few years, as you said, we've been around since 2017, rather organically with people that, Anglophiles, expats, people that were a bit familiar with our content and knew where they could go to get kind of as much of it as possible. And now we're really, we're starting to grow beyond that, and we think there's a lot more opportunity to grow beyond that and really dimensionalize for non-Brits what is so special about British storytelling, because it is quite special. It's quite different.
Yeah, I bet. And obviously Cannes Film Festival is really about the craft of cinema, isn't it? But actually, as a speciality streaming service, I would just love to hear a little bit more about the opportunities that you see for the craft that is now in TV as well. Would love to hear a little bit more about that. Yeah,
I mean, I think what's truly, I think, special about British television is the ode to craft and how it's craft both in front of and behind the camera. So many actors go to RADA or to really invest in training to become craftsmen, and it's very much reflected in the work. And I think while it's probably not the maybe there's not as much television here at Cannes Film, so many of those classic film techniques, that craft is very much embedded into so much of the best of storytelling, not only for British, but for everywhere now.
And do you think that sort of drives a loyalty with the fandoms and the communities? I would imagine some of the shows that are on BritBox have got incredibly loyal fandoms that follow this and probably follow them for quite a long time.
Oh, yes, yes. So we actually just had our final season of a show called Vera, which I'm sure you know.
Very well.
Which is a favorite in the UK and I would say arguably our most popular show in the US. And
is it really? Vera?
I think it's our most popular, yeah. 14 seasons.
My mother will be thrilled because she never misses an episode.
Yeah. And so in the final season, we had all these, we listen to our fans all the time, and we actively engage with them on social, and they often email us. And, again, we're specialty, so it's not, it's a lovely size, but it's not mass. But lots of love notes and, like, sadness around Vera ending and sort of like the end of, an era. And so what we did is we actually published, not all, but many of the love notes, and we created a book for Brenda, the star of Vera, and the creator, and we presented it to them, like I think they were doing something at the BFI, like to promote the final season, and we recorded it, we videoed it, and then we shared it back with fans, and it was like just one of these moments where like
real
fans
circular
felt
moment.
So connected back to the show that I think was really indicative of the experience that BritBox is trying to achieve.
And how do you approach this sort of listening to those fans? I mean, I would imagine these communities are so wide. Like, how do you approach that listening and really tapping that listening and the sort of data and the insights that you get back from them, tapping that into your sort of overarching plan? Is that something that you focus on quite a lot, or does it come quite organically?
It's probably a little bit of both. We definitely focus on it. I can't imagine that it's particularly in streaming, but in any industry these days. I just was listening to your compelling talk about Magnum and what they're doing. It's so interesting. You don't think about it when you think about ice cream, like a luxury brand. So it's fascinating. But there's no marketing today without data, even for the most creatively minded. And I'm not pointing myself because I'm not the most creatively minded person, but even for the most creative people, data is so important. And the data that matters most is how your consumers are feeling and how they're reacting and what they're engaging with. So we do a lot of mining for those insights within the data that we have access to in terms of how they're engaging with the content. We do a lot of listening on social. We do a lot of competitive listening, and we do a lot of syndicated research, and we do a lot of our own customer research, pretty much like all the time. New users, leaving users. When we're coming up with new ideas, we go right to the consumer base and are asking them what they think about this idea or that idea. So
it feels like such a gift in modern marketing, doesn't it? That actually we've got this pool of people that you can really dive into and that you can get really real-time insights from. That feels like such a gift to me.
It's such a gift, and I think particularly the people that consider themselves fans and back to HBO, one of the things that I think I mentioned this in this article, one of the things that really taught me, and I think what's so special about that brand is that, yes, people think it's a phenomenal brand and high quality and all the things that anybody wants their brand to be, but people have a real brand identity as it relates to like, well, I'm an HBO fan. Like, it says something about them, and I think BritBox, in its own way, does much the same. And so that's one of the experiences that I'm really trying to kind of bring forth, because I think the fans, when you actually ask them what they think and then they see it come to life, that is the ultimate win.
And there's a huge amount of loyalty that I would imagine that drives as well. And also, nobody knows these shows and this content like your fans. So actually, they're such tuned in audiences, aren't they? There's such rich data that comes from them.
Yeah, we're very lucky. Over half of our owned and operated subscribers are on an annual plan, and we have incredible retention and loyalty with our customers, which is very hard in streaming, because if you're bored with one show, if you're done, or if your favorite show is done, it's often a time that you might leave and go to something else. And so we've been really lucky. We have a way to really super serve our audience. And even though we're specialty and niche, it's sort of a differentiator in some ways. We don't have to be everything to everybody. We just have to be true to the audience that we're trying to service. And, I think the biggest challenge is how do you continue to do that and bring in new audiences?
Now, of course, you've got a new campaign out called See It Differently. I would love to understand about how all the data and insights work that you clearly do, how that has informed the strategy of that campaign, how that's fed through into the creative and the impact that you hope that's going to have for BritBox.
Yeah. So we did, I mean, it's funny, these things take much longer than you think from just seeing a spot on television, right? But we started actually maybe a year and a half ago with doing some real research around our positioning. And we really felt like we were at a moment where we needed to take the brand to a more emotional space. Like, you know, BritBox, British is in our name, on the tin, as they like to say, right? Or and our big tagline was "Stream the best of British television." It's pretty straightforward, and again, it appealed to people that really like knew they liked British content, right? Like knew what that stood for, knew what that meant, and we grew rather organically and successfully against that audience. So we kind of went back and said to those fans, like, well, what does that mean to you? What does British television stand for you as Americans, as Canadians, as Australians? And they then through that work, it kind of became obvious that like there's a lot of people that don't know what British television is about. You know, some people are like, oh, I know Doctor Who, or I know Vera, or, you know, I know Agatha Christie, but sort of the unexpected range of television that's produced, the quality, you know, very premium quality productions, craft in front of and behind the camera, real stories about real people. We call it, sometimes we say internally, like brains over bullets. It's like not the big, necessarily action-packed, like, you know, mega films that you might see premiering at Cannes and elsewhere, but it's really about, like, you know, the criminal minds, if you will, or the people that are solving these cases. And so we thought if we could dimensionalize that for other audiences, they could understand that, in fact, British is for them. You know, and so that's how See It Differently was born.
I mean, it's a beautiful campaign. Do you want to talk us through, if anyone hasn't seen it, the sort of the creative?
Unless you're in the U.S. and Canada, and I guess shortly it'll launch in Australia, you won't have seen it because we're not in France and in Europe, and we're not in the UK anymore even. So it is essentially a woman sitting in her, you know, living room, regular woman, and she slowly transforms into these characters, which are meant to sort of demonstrate the range of sort of British programming. So it's like a slight nod to comedy, and then she, you know, then our most popular genres are really period, which of course the Brits are well known for, crime and mystery. And so she transforms into these different characters where you're all of a sudden in these very immersive scenes, and then it resolves back that all along she's been sitting on her couch and sort of flipping through the interface of BritBox, and then you see sort of the real programs that she in turn has immersed herself into. And so what's interesting about the campaign is that it's all shot in one single take in the studio, with a lot of really the whole campaign is an ode to craft and to sort of the classic film techniques of like matte paintings and clever use of miniatures to make them look bigger, and all kinds of techniques like that in the end you see, because you're basically seeing the set change as the character changes. So, yeah, it's really meant to show sort of the altering of perspective, right? Like there's this tiny little matte painting, and then all of a sudden it looks like, you know, a big, you know, cottage, you know, on the British countryside. So it's meant to really take an ode to the changing of perspectives. And we like to, you know, I would say our brand ambition is really to inspire audiences to entertain new perspectives. And we think that for non-British audiences to kind of open up and look at what is different, but yet in many ways similar to the content they love, is really a slight shift in perspective, has the power to really open up your appetite for something totally new.
Yeah, I love that sort of the different perspectives. Do you reckon that sort of escapism, especially with everything that is going on in the world right now? I know for me personally, TV is such an escape. Do you think? And when I saw the campaign, I was sort of taken into so many different worlds, and it made me realise what TV does for us in this day and age. Is that you can really escape into these truly beautiful. I'm a big fan of Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
You know, and you just get lost in it because it's so beautiful, and it takes you back to a different time with a different perspective. So when I watched it, I was thinking about escapism, but you're talking about the sort of different perspectives.
I mean, I think that's very much true. In fact, we do a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of research, and one of the biggest kind of, characteristics that people use to describe BritBox is like the feelings that it generates is a feeling of escape. And so that immersion, that ability to immerse yourself in a story and feel like you're taken to a different place. I mean, we often say, that even place, like where the content takes place, is almost its own character in British television, right? Like when things are on the in Wales or in the British countryside, like there is very much that feeling of escapism that we lean into, and I think that's why our fans can get really lost in our content.
Yeah, totally. I'd love to know what's on the agenda for the next 12 months for BritBox as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. Well, the brand campaign just recently launched, and it's more than a video. It's a real 360 campaign. We're in social. We're doing some immersive things in out of home, which is exciting in some of our key markets in the U.S. We're working towards some experiential activations, much like the conversation that you talked about yesterday. I might pick your brain. Early days for us. And what's exciting for us, and as a brand marketer, I'm sure you know, it's one thing to sort of build brand awareness, but you need the proof points in the product or in the service. And for us, the product is the content. It's the shows. And so really, really excited because we have such a tremendous slate of shows that have just launched and that are launching all year long that we hope with the brand campaign can really amplify, BritBox awareness.
So that brand campaign is really acting as that sort of backbone for you for the next 12 months.
Yes,
and it's sort of really making sure you've got this one salient point that you're landing over and over again around the different perspectives, around escapism, but then where you take that into is going to be very varied, it sounds.
Yeah. So a lot of exciting shows. We just launched Toward Zero. It's become our most successful launch in terms of viewership in its first week. It's a remake of an Agatha Christie classic, modern day, starring Angelica Houston and Matthew Rhys. I mean, it's like one of the most beautiful productions I've ever seen. It's kind of hard to go wrong when you have talent like that. But really emblematic of like prestige television. So we did a pretty full 360 campaign on that, including lots of an in-person event and a screening and a party. We invited a lot of tastemakers to it. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do now because we're trying to get BritBox into that ether of conversation as well. So that's been great. And we have a new show launching actually at a different festival called Tribeca. Sorry, this is still the king of all festivals, called Outrageous, which is based on the true story of the Mitford sisters, which maybe as a Brit you know.
I don't actually. Please do tell.
Okay, well, I'm pretty confident that no one in the U.S. knows as well. But so the Mitford sisters are a notorious family, six sisters, and one brother. And in the kind of we like lovingly but also frighteningly sometimes refer to them as the Kardashians of their time. They like made tabloids and headlines long before
icons.
Yeah, and long before like where British like tabloids went, where they are today. And but in a very trying period of time in British history, in the 30s and 40s, at the rise of fascism, at the rise of communism, and how the UK kind of sat in the middle of that. And so these were women who kind of broke against like conventions and really were before their time in many ways, very bold, outrageous, but also very very challenged in many ways in terms of the directions that some of them went. So it's like a really modern period take that only the Brits could tell. It's an original
That must
Brit
feel
story.
really special as a female leader to be able to be part of the storytelling of those really important female stories, actually.
I mean, it's an incredible privilege to work on shows like that.
I bet. What is your favourite TV show at the moment? That's what I really want to know.
Oh, wow. On BritBox or off? Both, right. Well, I absolutely adore Towards Zero. And I actually really loved Ludwig, which I don't know if any of you watched. It's about a puzzle maker who becomes like an unexpected detective. And I think it's the biggest show that the BBC has launched all year, if not over the last 2 years in the UK. And we just brought it to the US. Really, I think that timing of being able to kind of deliver it right, almost right away after. And it's been wildly successful for us. And it's just so enjoyable, such an enjoyable and smart television. So that's a good one. Off BritBox, what's my favorite right now? I'm watching The Last of Us. I'm still a HBO lover at heart. Yeah.
Just can't get away from it.
Very different. Talk about sort of darkness. We actually were having a joke. It wasn't us, but someone on social made a joke about, and again, I don't do this in any kind of way other than with love, but there's all this bundling, and so there's this ad of Hulu, Disney, and HBO, because they have a bundle going on in the US right now, and it features The Last of Us from HBO. It features Andor. I'm pointing at my husband because he knows. Andor, which is, I think, pretty dark for Disney. And what's the show? The Handmaid's Tale from Hulu. Okay. Yes. So relatively dark, dystopian comments. And it was sort of, I think the comment was, I want to kill myself. Like, it was like, could we have more darkness in our times? And so we are joking, and maybe a social campaign we're kind of thinking about is like, we're the antidote to that. Like, our shows make you feel good, even if they're about crime, even if there's another murder in a small British countryside, like, it gets wrapped up, it gets solved. There's justice is done. And so that sort of feeling of like, you feel good afterwards is
well, that's
kind
what we want TV to do, isn't it? We want to feel good. And there is so much darkness on so many of the streaming platforms. It's all, the murder documentaries and, the very, very dark subject matter. So it must be great to, to work on shows that really bring a joy and a lightness to people's lives, because I think we all need it right now.
I agree. Not that there isn't a place. I still think The Last of Us is brilliant.
Okay.
Brilliant done.
Well, look, thank you so much for that chat. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.